Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
So, stressed about being stressed is our topic. And this time of year, we tend to get stressed. It seems to be our default position. We want to help you find ways to de-stress, to not get so caught up in the stress that it affects everything. So, I want to know, to start off, what are the things that stress you out the most around the holidays? What are some of the biggest stressors? So go ahead and type in the chat. I want to see from you, like, what are the things about the holidays that just totally stress you out? For me, it's family parties and large gatherings, I think. And not that they're that much work or anything like that. I think a lot of it for me is just being around big groups of people is not my jam. And that is a stressful thing to me. So we had one last night, and it's like, I don't know. It's so many people. It's so much noise. It's so whatever. And I'm overstimulated. Let's see. My family getting along, Terry says. Yeah, I could see that. Like, making sure that everybody keeps the peace and everything. Camille, expectations, which I so agree with that. Expectations are scary, right? I always say expectations are a fungal rot, because
he does say that.
Undeclared expectations, because if people don't declare their expectations, then you can't meet something you don't know that a standard you're being held to, and so it can totally kind of rot a relationship without anyone knowing about it. Fitting in at all family, friends, traditions. Yeah, I can see that, Rayanne. That's feeling, like you do fit in those social gatherings and stuff. So much of Christmas is about those social gatherings. And that's tough. Just Diane says so many things on the to-do list, trying to make everything perfect. Yeah, the perfection, that's a high standard, right? Perfect is a pretty brutal standard. And trying to get all the things in is hard. Teenagers, money, yes, those are also very stressful things. Teenagers' understanding of money makes it more stressful because they don't get what their expectations mean as far as the impact on the whole family, right? Christy says getting grades done. Yeah, I'll bet that's true for those of you that teach. Oh, Shannon's taken off, so she's just saying bye. She's got tennis this morning. So getting grades done so I can relax before planning next semester. Yeah, I'll bet for those of you who teach school, that is brutal. Wrapping up grades during the holidays, that's not fun. And then having to plan the next semester, get your lesson plans all together and everything. So definitely the holidays can be a stressful, super stressful time. So thanks so much for all those responses. That's awesome to see, like, what are the things that are adding stress to your holiday season. So that leads to another question. Oh, too much unhealthy food around, Leslie says. That's another good one. All the Christmas stuff from neighbors and things. There's a lot, and it piles up quick. So I've got another question for you. Is stress actually bad, or is it just piling up of good things? Which some of it is, right? Like all the family parties and the gift giving and some of the things that stress us out aren't necessarily bad things, but they definitely weigh heavy on us. And so we want to talk a little bit more about mindset around stress and how to be, what's in control versus out of control stress. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mark. Hey, Mark.
Oh, whoops, I was muted. It's me in my Mr. Rogers cardigan.
I love Mr. Rogers cardigans.
He's great. So, quick aside, there is about this involves cardigans and Mr. Rogers. There was a thing I was reading, and they talked about doing studies, and if they um, like the kind of meaning that we attach to different objects, and it was talking about like people will not want to wear like a sweater that was worn by a serial killer, even if it was like washed, dry cleaned, whatever. Um, because like they don't want to get that on them. But then the same thing, it's like, oh yeah, I would totally wear one of Mr. Rogers' sweaters. Like I feel like it'd make me nicer. Is kind of what the results bore out for this particular little study, which was weird and random. And there you go. Anyway,
So is that a serial killer sweater or is that Mr. Rogers sweater?
this is Mr. Rogers.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, good.
There you go.
I thought you were
Totally
going
that
to
up.
maybe that you bought a serial
No,
killer sweater.
definitely
Okay.
not. No.
Okay.
So I think that Camille hit the nail on the head really well with that idea of expectations.
Yeah.
Because like Cameron said, it isn't necessarily the event that causes that response. It's what are our beliefs around the event? Like what have we built up? And typically it's expectations. So like for example, mine is just getting all the gifts for Christmas, like doing something that's meaningful, that shows the person that I appreciate them and that I took like some thought to, consider their preferences. If it were up to me, I would just give everyone some money and we'd call it good. But like that's why I actually enjoy Thanksgiving more. Because even if I have to cook all day, like I don't have to worry about, oh, did I get the right present and did I get it in time? And so that's always my thing. And so what are our expectations around that? And again, I think it's more those chronic, unending stressors, right? Our body's stress systems, let's call them, were really efficiently designed, right? It was meant to get us either, kind of fight, flight, or freeze behavior, to help us deal with whatever the short-term situation was, and then we could kind of go back to baseline. There's a coming war party, or there's a lion, or there's a snake in your path, and you've got to get out of the way. Any number of those things, but our bodies weren't necessarily designed to handle this just chronic, unending stressors. And so, our body is just, we've talked about this before, our brain is just always trying to predict our energy needs, right? What are we going to need for the upcoming situation? Sometimes we call cortisol the stress hormone, and it isn't really a stress hormone. It's released whenever our body anticipates needing energy for something. The problem is that cycle of energy expectation and then release, energy expectation and then release, energy expectation and release, it becomes problematic over time, right? It kind of makes our bodies go haywire. And so in dealing with stress, it doesn't necessarily mean we change the circumstances of our life, although sometimes that's an adequate response, right? And we'll talk about some of those things in identifying triggers, but are there maybe some issues around boundary setting that would help to manage this better? But a lot of it isn't changing the circumstances; it's managing our response and some of those things around it, right? What are our expectations? What are the emotions that we're feeling? What are the triggers that tend to lead me stress? And then being able to identify those triggers and then interrupt the spiral like we have in this list.
Yeah, that's so important to not let it go on. If it's something that's stressing you out and actually like keeping you up and truly stressing you out to the level that it's maybe pathological, because some stress is okay, some stress is good. It drives us to get busy and do things and get things done. Some of it's not so bad, but it's identifying what are those things that really are interrupting my life and then finding how to interrupt the spiral of those things so we don't get caught in that and have it drag us down. So I feel like there are things that we can do that are within our control and things that are outside of our control, that we have to kind of focus on, that we say, okay, with any of these stressors, what is something within that I can do something about? And what are the aspects that I can't do something about? And focus on the things that like I can control that aspect of it. And by focusing on that, hopefully it puts us back in a position where we feel like we have some like power, some control over that stressor, where it's not just happening to us, but we can do something about it. I know it's tricky to find that balance, to find how to do that. So with anything that I'm stressing about, that's something I try to do is, okay, what can I do about that? I always say, like I'm not allowed to complain about something unless I'm prepared to do something about it. Because just complaining about something that I'm not going to change is just kind of whining. Whereas complaining about something that I'm trying to find a solution for, and ready to like act on that solution, that's something that I'm working through versus just complaining about.
Well, so
Yeah.
I like this idea of identifying what you said, identifying the action plan,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives our brain something to focus on.
Right.
A lot of anxiety and stress is out of uncertainty, right? I don't necessarily have an action plan. I just have this feeling, this worry, and it's just kind of this nebulous feeling. And so being able to take it apart and recognize what can I control, right? Usually that's us, ourselves, our feelings, our responses. Can't really control other people, can't always control the circumstances. And so recognizing that and then saying, okay, well, within the parameters of things that I can control, what can I do? X, Y, or Z, or what are a couple of different options? And just having those action plans, even before we execute them, just having those action plans can bring some of that stress down. And again, like our brains are kind of focus-driven machines. What we pay attention to is what we end up seeing, what we end up thinking, and that becomes our outcomes. And so if we have these couple of different action plans, instead of just this nebulous like, oh, I just feel awful feeling, or I'm worried about this, we can I think there's definitely room to sit there and appreciate it and label it and figuring out like, well, what am I actually feeling, right? Am I feeling disappointment? Am I feeling fear? Am I feeling frustration? Am I feeling guilt, right? Any of those things, and just figuring out what am I actually sitting with,
Yeah.
and then what am I going to go and do about it? I think both those parts are important, so that it's not about just pushing through and getting rid of that emotion, but it's recognizing, acknowledging that it's there. What's that about, and then making an action plan to what am I going to do? What are the next steps? And sometimes the next steps are just changing the thought pattern, right? I'm going to try on a different thought for size, right?
Yeah.
Is this thing that I'm stressed about really true? Okay, maybe it's not. What would I rather think? And then replacing it with that. And it can be simple like that. It can be really small, simple action plans, but it's just about shifting the angle that we're looking at, and then finding a workable solution, whether that's just thought replacement or is actually, oh, I'm going to go do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. One of the things that, I guess to put that into an example of like one of the things that we talked about was expectations. One of the ways you can make that more bite-sized, what people's expectations are, is kind of have a little expectation powwow with people. Like, hey, this is what I'm capable of doing this year. Or asking them, what are your expectations? Like, what do you want Christmas to look like? Or what do you want? Like, and probably this isn't necessarily the time of season to do it. Probably would be best a month or two ago. But just to sit down with everybody and say, okay, what are expectations for Christmas? This is where we're at. This is, even to be realistic with people about this is where we're at financially and things. And now you can't do that with everyone that you may be gift giving to or going to a party with or things like that. But at least some core people in your life, you can sit down and hammer out some of those expectations. Probably not a bad idea to know. I know Shannon had to do that with me many times and probably still should. And probably does every couple of years when I get off track. But sitting down of like, this is what Christmas, what I expect Christmas to look like, be like, Christmas, birthdays, holidays. So for me, that's not a big emphasis, like gifts and celebrations and stuff like that. I just like being with people. And so I'm not very good at birthdays or other things like that. And so that's a conversation we have to have often. Is like what expectations there are. And it's not so much about getting the gift as much as it is about like feeling thought about and appreciated, and those things like Mark said. Like those are the more important aspects, but it's helpful for me to know kind of what the expectation is there, so I'm not letting people down. So Shannon says, I play worst possible scenario with myself, and most of the time, even the worst case scenario isn't that bad, right? And that's so true when you run through those types of things in your head of like, okay, what is going to be the worst case scenario that's realistic? Because sometimes I know some of Shannon's worst case scenarios, and sometimes they're really funny that you're like, well, that would never happen. But most of those come in dreams. She gets mad at me about things that she dreams about.
How dare you, Cameron?
I know. It's pretty funny though. But yeah, a lot of the time your worst case scenario thing, when you really look at it, it's like, that's not that bad. If it were to happen, we'd deal with that too, you know? Anyway, so managing and setting those expectations, like having an expectations meeting with somebody, can be one of those ways of taking back control of that stressor.
So I want to talk to Shannon's point really quick, because I had a really interesting conversation with a friend the other day about like worst case scenario catastrophization. And it was interesting because he had me try this little exercise, and said most of the time when we are like going through worst case scenarios, it's typically been preceded by some sort of fantasy, right? This is the like the best case scenario, right? What does it look like? And I would be doing this fun thing, and we imagine ourselves experiencing some really really awesome event. And I went to this really cool vacation place, or I got everyone the perfect gift, or whatever it is. And then that ends up funneling down and kind of reversing itself into worst case scenario. So that'd be just an interesting exercise for you guys to try, is just think about that, right? When you start going through worst case scenarios, what were you thinking of before then? And for myself, I can almost always tie it to something. And he contrasted fantasy to dream creation, right? What's this thing that I want that's not so much about having ease or relaxation or comfort, but that's about being able to enjoy other people's company, enjoy other people's presence, and give of our best to them. And he said with dream creation, right, we still have this hope for outcome, but then we connect it to what are the millimeter steps that I can take between where I'm at now and where I'd like to be, and then executing action plan after action plan after action plan. And so that it's still a dream in a way, but it's connected to reality by all those steps, versus just up in the clouds as fantasy. And so I've tried to be conscious of that whenever I start, when anxiety starts rising, or when I'm starting to catastrophize. What is it that I've been hoping for? What is it that I've been expecting? And then can I flip that? And what's the dream that I'd like to create? And what are the steps that are going to get me to that dream? It was a really interesting flip on things. So
yeah, I think that's interesting. That's a great way to kind of cut the stress out of that thought spiral, right? To make that so it doesn't keep building into more of a stress or anxiety event. So that being said, what are some of your favorite, so drop it in the chat again, what are some of your favorite de-stressors? What are some of the things you like to do to cut out the stress in your life? Either around the holidays or just in general in life. So around the holidays, we often go up to the cabin, and one of my favorite things, so we're in a cabin and we're packed in there, and there's 40 people, sometimes more, 30, 40 people, and it's a lot of little kids, and it gets really hectic, and that's just not my jam. Crowds of people, not my thing. And so my favorite de-stressor up there is to go fly fishing in the middle of the winter, in the middle of a frozen river. I'll go out and go fish because it's just me and the river, and I can kind of let my brain relax and chill, and it's great. So for me, like a run or a hike or a cross country ski or something like that, but I love the fly fishing. That really is a good reset for me. When I'm home though, for Christmas, when I'm here, that's a little bit harder because we still have family gatherings and parties and stuff, but there's not that same way to de-stress or decompress. So going on a run or things like that. Let's see. We've got a bunch of them rolling in. So jigsaw puzzles, Lori says. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, doing a puzzle together. Camille says take a walk, which I love. Yeah, that's perfect. Just get outside, get some fresh air, and get away from the stressors. Hiking, snowshoeing, Christy says, which is perfect. Diane says hot baths, playing the piano, doing something creative, and running. I love it. Yeah. That's an interesting thing, the creative outlet of kind of letting your mind get focused on something like that. Shannon says playing tennis or pickleball, which, yeah, a great way to kind of de-stress and just like focus on your playing instead of focusing on the stressors of life. I think Lori's oh, that's funny. Mark says, I think Lori's de-stressor of the jigsaw puzzles is one of Mark's stressors. That's hilarious. I love jigsaw puzzles. They're fun. My problem is my attention span for them is short. But I
can do 100 or less.
Oh, really? No, I love them. I love the like big 1,000-piece puzzles and stuff. I think it's fun. But I have to do it in like chunks over time. I can't do it all just at once. But that's...
And then 6 months later, you finally finish it?
No, we'll do one. We've done it a couple of times when we'll do like a ski trip, like a ski vacation. Up at Grand Targhee, we'll pull out a huge puzzle and we'll do the whole thing over that week that we're there. So it's fun. I like big puzzles. But yeah, so those things are so helpful. Just finding ways to interrupt the pattern, get outside and do, or do an activity with either yourself or small groups. It's just about interrupting that pattern. Sam says you got to listen to a book or podcast while you do the puzzle. No, that's not a bad idea. Especially like around Christmas time, that would be awesome to listen to a Christmas story, Christmas short story or book, and work on a puzzle together. That'd be fun. Laugh, talk to my sister. Yeah, I love that, Leslie. Finding somebody that you can connect with and just laugh about stuff. That's perfect. I love it. There's so many ways to kind of interrupt the stressors and de-stress. And so that's so important to find ways to do that. And everybody's system, everybody's way of doing it is going to be different. The important part is finding for you what interrupts the cycle. So that's what we said, identify the triggers. So what is making me feel so stressed? Identify those things and then interrupting that spiral. What is it that's going to help me interrupt it? So for me, it's like large group gatherings. Not my favorite thing. Stress me out. So for me, the way to interrupt that cycle is to go do kind of a solo activity. That really seems to help me. And it usually something physical or something like out in nature. So it's just about finding that pattern for you of how to do that. Interrupting and then finding a way to kind of focus your mind on something else. So anyway, thanks for sharing all those things. That's awesome. Go ahead.
Well, I think with identifying the triggers and interrupting the spiral, doing that quick, right? As soon as you notice the pressure rising, use that as a cue to say, well, what's going on? What's really what's driving this? I've talked before about, we always talk about the 5 patterns because we love that. But are there any of those areas, right, when that stress is starting to rise? Have I been sleeping well during this time? I think that's really easy during the holidays. You stay up late, you get up early. As we mentioned on here, there's a lot of good food around, lots of sweets and stuff. And so just checking in with each of those things. And it doesn't mean you have to make a big shift, but it's check in and are there some little improvements that I could make here, and then just what are ways I can interrupt that spiral and get that through. I've actually been trying an app that one of my friends recommended. It's called Waking Up. There's a podcast that will drop today where I interviewed my friend. He talked about his experience using this app, and with this, it's developed by a neuroscientist, and around mindfulness and stuff. So pretty cool. You might check that out. It's called Waking Up. But are there different practices that you can do like that? I know a lot of times for me, when there's a lot of family around, like I've recognized that I just need a little bit of quiet time. So I'll just go find a quiet place and just read for a little while, and then I can go back and I'm refreshed. And so what are those different practices that that you can do that just help to relieve the pressure on that and kind of get you back to where you can deal with whatever whatever's going on?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so good. There was something you said that I wanted to respond to, and now I forgot. At the very beginning.
The podcast?
You said. No, before.
Oh.
Anyway.
I don't know.
Yeah, but whatever you can find to help you interrupt that cycle, that's the key, and be able to get back on track. And it just is so individually based. There's no right or wrong, whether that's go read a book or go outside and do something. All of it works. It's just finding what works for you. And that's the key, is you're substituting the stressor for something that helps you de-stress, that recharges your batteries, that helps you get back in control of those thoughts and everything. So that's the key. Thanks so much for joining us on the call. That's all I got on that. Mark, you, any final thoughts?
No, I just, be mindful of this as we're gearing up towards what can be a stressful time for people, and make an action plan now. We got a couple days before all the festivities start. Maybe we have family in town right now, but just make some time, make a list, identify those triggers, and then have an action plan for when stress starts rising, so that that this season ends up being a really fun time instead of a really stressful time.
Yeah, love it. Perfect. Okay. That's all we got. Look forward to the call tomorrow evening. I think all the calls, we may need to go a half hour early, 11 a.m. again on
Thursday.
But other than that, I think we should be business as usual. Thanks so much again for hopping on the call this morning. It was a great call, and thanks for all your input. Love that feedback from you guys, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.